Behind every door in this space hides another dimensional world. In order to figure out what was going on, the government sent several teams to explore. An agent team opened a door and came to a seemingly harmless candy planet. However, in the next second, these big-eyed creatures transformed into terrifying little demons. Immediately after that, the little demons closed the door. Now the agents were completely isolated. Their protective suits were instantly torn to shreds by the alien little monsters. Although the agents tried their best to survive, some of their companions still died on this beautiful planet, and it all started a few months ago. Peacemaker Chris was awakened by his pet bald eagle as usual, but it was snowing heavily outside, and Chris really didn't feel like going out to walk the eagle, so he opened the quantum teleportation door in his house, and planned to go to the dimensional node to walk the eagle. Because this place was connected to countless universes, it was possible to occasionally see residents from other planets. Chris greeted the other party warmly, but the alien remained expressionless and didn't give any response. After more than half an hour, Chris saw that the time was almost up, so he whistled to call the bald eagle back, but he didn't see its figure for a long time. Chris suddenly frowned, then he went deep into the dimensional node alone, to look for the trace of the bald eagle. After walking for a long time, he saw the bald eagle standing guard in front of a door. To Chris' surprise, there were many Peacemaker helmets placed around that door. In addition, this door looked exactly the same as the one in his own home. Driven by curiosity, Chris entered the password of his own home. Unexpectedly, it really opened the door. After entering, Chris was stunned by the scene in front of him. It was a luxurious mansion, and there were many hero trophies on the cabinet. What surprised Chris the most was that there was also a photo of him, his father and his brother in it. Chris really couldn't understand what was going on. After all, he remembered very clearly that he personally shot and killed his father in the last season, and his brother Keith also died when he was 8 years old. Chris fled out of that door in a hurry. After returning to the original world, Chris pretended that nothing had happened and went to the Justice League for an interview. Chris had been brooding over those superheroes in the first season. He also wanted to make a name for himself. But when Chris came to the interview place, he saw a person dressed as a bunny girl, rushing out of the interview room crying. Chris walked in with a full confusion. The three judges asked him to introduce his abilities. Chris recognized them as Lord, the investor of the Justice League, Green Lantern, and Hawkgirl, so he put on his best performance, and told them about his various achievements. However, Lord dismissed him as a violent man with antisocial personality. Then Lord asked about the time Chris had spent in prison before. Chris could only explain helplessly that it was a necessary price to pay for safeguarding world peace, but Lord and the others had no patience at all. After listening to Chris, they even started chatting about their own butts, right in front of him.
His butt's been getting really big lately, so...
My butt's not big enough. Honestly, when I'm naked, it's just like a line.
Later, Lord also complained that all the interviewees from the West Coast were garbage and not worth mentioning. Hearing this, the anger in Chris' heart finally erupted. He scolded Lord and the others fiercely for their behavior. Only then did they realize that their communication device was broken, which had allowed Chris to hear their conversation.
Oh my god, how many times did I mention that rabbit woman's camel toe? I must have said it 30 times.
Chris had no intention of dealing with these jerks, and rushed out of the interview room in anger. On the other hand, Chris' partner Amy was fired by Argus because of what happened last season, and now she had to find a new job to make a living. But she had only received elite agent training all along, so the interviewers, upon learning this, thought Amy was also a violent person with antisocial personality, and firmly rejected her job application. This filled Amy with anger, and she kept smashing the car to vent her resentment. When she returned to her residence, she found Chris actually waiting there. Amy thought he had something important to talk about, but she never expected he had come. Just because of their one-night stand in the previous season, Chris kept asking Amy if she had been sincere that night, and if he still had a chance to spend a romantic night with her. Amy was extremely annoyed by Chris. She firmly stated that that night was just an accident, and she had been drunk and remembered nothing, telling Chris not to pester her anymore. Then she kicked him out. After returning to his residence, the frustrated Chris decided to hold a party with beautiful women, to let himself loose. Before long, Chris' small house was filled with hot and beautiful women. Even so, Chris still felt empty inside. he actually opened that quantum portal again, and then went to the door he had seen before. At the same time, Argus headquarters detected a sudden quantum signal, appearing somewhere in Metropolis, to prevent a repeat of the incident, where Luther released a spatial rift in Metropolis before. The leader flag immediately ordered to track the source of the quantum signal. After confirming the approximate location, Argus ordered Igor, the agent monitoring Chris, to go and check if Chris was up to something. Behind the scenes, however, Flag and the others would never have expected that Igor had long been Chris' partner. Therefore, when Igor saw that the quantum fluctuation was indeed caused by Chris, he resolutely chose to cover for him. Igor lied, saying that Chris was currently immersed in the party, and no abnormalities had been found. Flag and the others weren't fools. After hearing Igor's report, he first classified this incident as a highly dangerous level 1 incident, then he arranged for a veteran agent to go and monitor Chris together with Igor. At the same time, Chris entered the world behind that door again, looking at the photos on the wall of himself fighting side by side with his father and others. Chris couldn't help but feel a little excited. Just then, his brother, Keith, who had long been dead in the original universe, appeared in front of Chris. Keith didn't notice anything different about him, and cared about Chris very warmly. Then his father also came to him. If we ignore the fact that Chris was an imposter, the scene in front of them was simply a model of a loving father and a filial son. This made Chris feel the warmth of a family. When he returned to his room, he still couldn't help but burst into tears because of that warmth. Then, Chris noticed that in this world, his relationship with Amy seemed to be very good, and there were many photos of them together in the room. Just as Chris was filled with envy about this, he never expected that the Chris from this universe would suddenly appear behind him, faced with this man who broke into his room and had an identical face. The Chris from the parallel universe immediately decided that the other person was a shapeshifter plotting some kind of conspiracy, and immediately launched an attack on Chris. At this time, Chris wasn't wearing his battle suit at all and was completely unarmed, so he turned around and fled without hesitation. Just as he was about to open the quantum portal, the attack from the parallel universe Chris hit his back accurately, leaving 2 bleeding wounds instantly. Chris struggled to escape into the dimensional node with his last strength. Just as he was about to catch his breath, he never expected that the parallel universe Chris would actually chase after him. The other person grabbed Chris by the neck, seemingly intending to kill him. In this critical moment, Chris unleashed immense strength and threw the parallel universe version of himself away. Unexpectedly, the other person was impaled by a sharp spike, and in this way, the Chris from the parallel universe died on the spot. Looking at the scene in front of him, Chris felt a little flustered. If Keith and others from the parallel universe found out about this, he would definitely be doomed. Chris tried to hide the other person's body in the surrounding cabinets, but the cabinets were too small to hold an adult man at all. Helplessly, Chris had to return to his original world immediately, then call his partner Ed and ask him to bring a bone saw and other tools for dismembering the body, to meet at his residence right away. During this time, the other person sent by Argus to monitor had also arrived at the location. This was a veteran agent named Fleury. Upon seeing Fleury, Igor immediately felt that something was wrong, and couldn't help but mutter a cursed flag. Not long after, another of Chris' partners, Ollie, suddenly came to visit. However, at this time, a party with beautiful women was still going on inside, and Chris was still waiting for Ed to deliver the tools. So he firmly refused Ollie's request to enter the house. Chris' abnormal behavior still aroused Ollie's suspicion. Helplessly, he had to tell her about the quantum portal. Upon hearing this, Ollie immediately suggested that Chris contact Argus professionals to handle it, but how could Chris agree to that? After all, in the previous season, he had accidentally killed Flag's son Rick due to losing control, and Flag was now looking for trouble with him. If he told Argus about the portal, the other side would have a reason to deal with Chris, and Flag would definitely not mind taking the opportunity to kill him to avenge his son. Just as Chris didn't know how to answer Ollie, Ed finally arrived with the tools. Chris took the opportunity to get rid of Ollie, then took Ed into the dimensional node. Almost at the same time, Fleury and the others in the monitoring car outside detected waves of quantum fluctuations coming from Chris' house, and he immediately reported this matter. His superior Bowl immediately ordered Fleury to lead an elite team to enter and search the house while Chris was away. When Chris looked at the body on the ground, Ed also looked extremely surprised. Chris spent a lot of effort to finally explain the whole story to Ed. Ed's expression showed uncontrollable excitement. After all, dismembering a peacemaker was really a very unusual experience. With Ed's help, Chris quickly dismembered the body into various small pieces, and then he decided to use his alien neighbor's incinerator to completely destroy these body. remains. After cleaning up all the traces, Chris finally breathed a sigh of relief. He returned to his room and immediately collapsed onto the bed. The events that happened today filled his heart with mixed emotions. However, even so, he still couldn't rest. There was a meeting of the Butterfly team members today, so Chris had to drag his tired body to the meeting place. When all members arrived, most of them started the party celebration. Only Chris watched Amy not far away and kept drinking in silence. He recalled the photos of Chris and Amy he had seen in another world before, and a sense of envy couldn't help but well up in his heart. He had also expressed his feelings to Amy, but every time it ended in failure. Earlier, Amy even told him not to keep pestering her. Chris kept numbing himself with alcohol, completely unaware that the Argus agents had sneaked into his residence. Through the detector, the Argus agents soon found a door emitting strong quantum fluctuations. Just as they were about to report this matter, the bald eagle left at home suddenly launched an attack on them. Although those agents were well equipped, there was no room for them to maneuver in this narrow room. Relying on the terrain advantage, the bald eagle quickly defeated these agents, leaving them in disarray, and finally wiped out Fleury and the others. In the middle of the night, Chris, who was dead drunk, finally returned to his residence. Because he drank too much, even though he saw the mess around him, he didn't pay much attention to it at all. The bald eagle originally planned to tell him about what had happened earlier, but Chris thought the bald eagle wanted to play around with him. After coaxing it a few times briefly, Chris stopped paying attention to the bald eagle. Instead, he picked up the phone from the parallel world and sent a message to Amy, hoping to go on a date with her. Unexpectedly, Amy from the parallel world actually replied to Chris, and even agreed to the date. The next day, Chris woke up from his hangover. Looking at the messages from last night, he immediately hurried to the park to go on the date with Amy. During their conversation, Chris learned that the version of himself and Amy in the parallel world had serious relationship problems and had even broken up. Now Amy's boyfriend was Rick, Flag's son, who had been killed by Chris in the original world. For a moment, Chris didn't know how to start talking. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a group of terrorists suddenly attacked the place. Fortunately, the two were far apart, which prevented Amy from suffering serious injuries, but because of the explosion just now, she looked extremely embarrassed and cancelled the date on the spot. Hearing this, Chris was instantly furious. His hard-earned chance to date Amy had been ruined by these jerks, so Chris chased after them immediately. By this time, the terrorists had rushed into the nearby government building amid the chaos and taken a hostage. The terrorist leader claimed that if the government didn't release their comrades, he would kill the hostage and would launch random terrorist attacks on government agencies every week afterward. They didn't notice at all that Chris had climbed into the government building by scaling the walls. A nearby terrorist heard an unusual sound and immediately went to check, only to be killed by Chris on the spot.
Wait. What happened?
Then Chris sneaked up behind another terrorist and took him out when he wasn't looking. But the kidnapped girl was so scared by the terrorist's gruesome death that she screamed out loud. This exposed Chris, and several other terrorists rushed over to check what was happening. However, they foolishly came one by one, so Chris took them down one after another. By the time the terrorist leader finally realized something was wrong, only a few of his men were left by his side. By this time, the pickup plane had already arrived, so the terrorists decided to take the remaining men and evacuate immediately. Unexpectedly, Chris had already been waiting on the way to the evacuation point, and he shot and killed everyone there on the spot, including the terrorist leader. As for the pickup helicopter on the rooftop, after waiting for a few minutes and not seeing the terrorist leader, it also realized something was wrong and was about to leave. The next second, the person who arrived was none other than Chris' brother Keith. The two hugged each other to celebrate preventing another disaster. The ordinary people around them also cheered for the two, and Chris, listening to the praises, became a little immersed in this world. After returning to his residence, Chris sent a message to Amy again, and to his surprise, she was extremely enthusiastic this time. It was obvious that Amy had been won over by Chris' actions when he took down the group of terrorists earlier that day. This made him realize that he might be able to take this opportunity to repair his relationship with Amy. While Chris was immersed in fantasies about the future, Argus from the original universe had already learned that the agent team had been completely wiped out by the bald eagle. They also detected quantum signals in Chris' house, which Argus took very seriously. Bull immediately ordered more agents to rush to Chris' house, and even to deal with the bald eagle. They specially invited a falconer who called himself the Red Mesa Saint, and because of the previous incident, Bull thought that Igor and Fleury alone weren't enough to monitor Chris, so she assigned Igor another partner, a judo master named Gel. At the same time, Chris, who was still in the parallel world, knew nothing about all this. He rode a cool motorcycle and raced down the street. Wherever he went, people cheered enthusiastically and praised him as a great hero who guarded the world. Looking at the excited crowd around him, Chris gradually lost himself. At one point, he even had the idea of staying here, but there were still people he cared about in his original world, so he finally left this world. When Chris returned to his original world through the quantum portal, the agents monitoring outside detected the quantum fluctuation again. They quickly armed themselves fully and launched an operation, vowing to arrest Chris. As for Chris himself, he was so tired that he collapsed onto the bed on the spot, planning to have a good rest. Just then, he finally noticed the bullet hole left by the previous agents in the house. Chris sobered up instantly and realized that his home had been broken into. He wasn't worried about property damage. Instead, he looked for the bald eagle first. When he found it foraging in the kitchen, he finally felt a little relieved. At this point, Chris suddenly received a message from his friend Igor, and only then did he learn that Argus agents had already arrived near his residence and were about to launch an attack on him. After seeing the message, Chris immediately realized the urgency of the situation. He hurried into the utility room, found a strange metal box, and then called the bald eagle to leave with him. Unexpectedly, the bald eagle didn't want to leave because it was greedy. Helplessly, Chris had to use the ham slices from the refrigerator to lure it into escaping together. As soon as the two left through the back door, the Argus agents arrived and quickly launched an operation to arrest Chris. When they rushed into the house, they found that Chris had escaped through the back door. Of course, Argus wouldn't give up so easily. They quickly outflanked from both sides and continued to chase Chris. The Red Mesa Saint soon found a trail left by the bald eagle.
Days old. Hints of cold cuts.
It didn't take long for the Red Mesa Saint to find the bald eagle. Just as he was about to make a move, Igor, who was behind him, suddenly attacked, knocking the Red Mesa Saint unconscious on the spot, and thus saving the bald eagle's life. On the other side, Chris was unfortunately caught up by the judo master Gel during his escape, and a fierce fight broke out between them immediately. Although the judo master mastered many fighting skills, and made Chris find him very difficult to deal with, in terms of pure strength, Gel was completely no match for Chris, so as long as Gel showed any flaw, what awaited him would be a devastating blow. Gel was thrown away by Chris, but soon he entangled Chris again. With the previous experience, Chris decided to take advantage of his physical strength and roll down the hillside with Gel. Such an attack might only cause minor injuries to Chris, but for Gel, it was almost the same as courting death. After the two rolled down the hillside together, Gel was knocked unconscious and completely lost his ability to fight. Then Chris picked up the metal box on the ground and fled the scene quickly. During this time, he sent a distress signal to his partner Ollie and shared his current location. After receiving the message, Ollie rushed to the target location quickly to pick up Chris and the bald eagle. Then the group ran all the way to a remote mountain cabin. To avoid the pursuit of Argus on the other side, Igor helped the awakened Red Mesa Saint up. Maybe because he hit his head just now, the Red Mesa Saint completely forgot what had happened before. Igor immediately made up a small story. He lied that another eagle had suddenly rushed out from behind just now, and it was the eagle that had knocked the Red Mesa Saint unconscious. Although Igor's story was full of flaws, the Red Mesa Saint's head was still groggy, and he couldn't think carefully about the problems in it. Unexpectedly, he chose to believe Igor's story. Chris told Ollie that he wanted to use this metal box to move the quantum portal from his home, which surprised Ollie a lot. Ollie had never heard of such technology, so she couldn't help but ask about the origins of the metal box and the quantum portal. From this, she learned that 35 years ago, when Chris and his brother were still children, their father took them hunting one day. They accidentally found and killed an alien in the woods. This metal box was the trophy obtained from the alien at that time, and it was also at that time that the father and his two sons got the quantum portal. After a long period of research, they finally figured out how to open the portal. Since then, the quantum portal had become a secret of the Chris family. Later, Ollie asked why Chris was so nervous about this portal, and thus learned that Chris had discovered the parallel world in the dimensional node. Chris's tone revealed reluctance, and it was obvious that the world over there was far better than the one here. Ollie didn't say much about this. While the two were talking, Igor called to tell Chris that the Argus agents were ready to crack the password of the quantum portal. Chris told Igor to try his best to delay them, and he would move the quantum portal immediately. Igor said he would do his best to delay. When he returned to the house, he began to use various excuses to delay the progress of everyone's password cracking. On the other side, Chris and his group ran all the way to the cabin, then chose a suitable location and opened the metal box. Under Chris's operation, bursts of arc light began to appear around the original ordinary doorframe. Chris successfully moved the quantum portal at the last moment. At this time, after Igor opened the combination lock, he found that there was just an ordinary wardrobe behind it. He immediately cursed Chris for being crazy to install such a high-end lock on a wardrobe. Not long after, Flag, the head of Argus, received a call from Bol and learned that they hadn't found any trace of the quantum space at Chris' residence. At the same time, he was also very confused about why Chris would install such a high-end lock on a wardrobe. However, Flag had no intention of letting Chris go just like that, so he immediately ordered his men to contact Amy, the dismissed agent, and planned to use her as bait to lure Chris into a trap. At this time, Amy, who still hadn't found a job, could only vent her anger through fighting. Unexpectedly, when she returned to her residence, she found Flag actually there. Flag immediately said that he could offer her a job again, but the condition was that she help Argus arrest Chris. At the same time, Chris and Ollie in the mountain cabin continued to talk about the content that had been interrupted by Igor's call earlier. From this, Ollie learned that in that parallel universe, not only were Chris' father and brother still alive, but Chris and Amy also had a passionate relationship. It was only due to a small accident that the Chris from the parallel world died, and now he planned to make up for the impact of this incident in his own way. Ollie persuaded him to accept reality, and she highly suspected that what was behind that door was either a real parallel world or some kind of special illusion. Maybe everything was just Chris' hallucination. However, Chris didn't pay any attention to Ollie's persuasion. After all, the world over there was far happier than the one here. He insisted on continuing to go to that parallel world. Seeing Chris' firm attitude, Ollie still tried to dissuade him. She claimed that, since fate had let Chris be born in this world, there must be some deep meaning behind it. However, Chris couldn't listen at this moment. He paranoidly thought that he might have belonged to that world originally, but was occupied by another damn doppelganger. Since heaven had given him a second chance, he had to hold on to it tightly in order to go to that world without any worries. Chris ignored Ollie's opposition and immediately sent a text message to Amy, hoping to meet her for the last time. At this time, Amy had already become Flag's subordinate, and she firmly agreed to Chris' request after receiving the message. On the other side, the Red Mesa Saint, who had a head injury, went deep into the forest alone, and drew an eagle totem on the ground. Then he danced a mysterious and strange dance around the blazing bonfire. The next second, the pattern of that eagle totem actually appeared on the Red Mesa Saint's forehead. At this moment, something incredible happened. The Red Mesa Saint actually saw the bald eagle flying in the sky thousands of miles away, and locked onto Chris' hiding place through this mysterious ritual. On the other side, after receiving Amy's reply, Chris drove to the agreed location, while Argus had already set up a tight net nearby to arrest him. Amid everyone's focused waiting, Chris finally appeared, but his behavior was strange, as if he had been avoiding something. After seeing Amy, he even tore off the monitor on her body on the spot. The Argus agents really couldn't understand how they had been exposed. Naturally, all this was thanks to Igor. Chris used Amy as a shield, making the Argus agents afraid to act rashly. When Amy saw that he had actually come, she was instantly furious and scolded him for ignoring her warning. It turned out that in her reply message earlier, Amy had used their agreed code word to warn Chris there was an ambush, but he still came without hesitation. At this point, Chris said he had something more important to figure out, and that more important thing turned out to be whether Amy had truly meant it during their intimate night together. Hearing this, Amy almost lost her temper. She firmly rejected Chris again, saying she had been drunk that night, didn't like him at all, and told him to give up on the idea forever. After hearing this answer, Chris was completely desperate. He even stood up, exposing himself to the sniper's scopes. Flag immediately ordered his men to surround Chris and not let him escape again. But Flag seriously underestimated Chris. Even though he was devastated and clearly in a bad state, he was still a superhero. Ordinary people were no match for him at all. When they couldn't subdue Chris, the hidden sniper Gel pulled the trigger without hesitation, but the tranquilizer dart accidentally hit an Argus agent instead. Gel was about to shoot again, but Chris unexpectedly picked up the agent and used him as a human shield. Gel knew very well that if the agent was hit by another tranquilizer dart, his life would be in danger, so he didn't dare to shoot. Again, seeing her men couldn't deal with Chris, Bull decided to take action herself. She snuck up on Chris from behind, her gun aimed at his vital spot. If Flag gave the order, she would shoot Chris in the head on the spot. Amy realized the danger and rushed forward to restrain Chris, barely saving his life. Unaware of the truth, Chris saw the person he loved join in the manhunt against him. He became even more disheartened and gave up resisting, letting the Argus agents take him away. Only Bull understood that Amy's earlier action had been to save Chris. After returning to Argus headquarters, Amy planned to team up with Igor to find a way to rescue Chris, but Igor, unaware of the truth and thinking Amy had really betrayed Chris, immediately accused her of selling out her friend for the job, and threatened to cut off all ties with her. Seeing this, Amy had to tell Igor everything that had happened. After learning the details, Igor finally understood Amy's good intentions, but even if they joined forces, their abilities alone wouldn't be enough to rescue someone from Argus at this point. Amy said they didn't need to act directly, they just needed Igor to log Chris' arrest in the system, which would make Flag hold back out of fear of consequences. On the other side, the imprisoned Chris was being brutally tortured by Flag. Flag had long wanted to avenge his son's death, and now Chris was finally in his hands. Just as Flag was about to act, Igor happened to finish logging Chris' arrest in the system. This way, if anything happened to Chris, Flag would be the prime suspect. He had to let Chris go and release him. After 24 hours in accordance with the rules, with Amy and Igor's help, Chris narrowly escaped death. At the same time, the Bald Eagle left at the cabin was facing another crisis. The Red Mesa Saint had locked onto the Bald Eagle's location through the earlier ritual, and had quietly arrived near the mountain cabin with his equipment. He injected a vial of poison into a dead mouse, then threw it at the door, trying to poison the Bald Eagle. Unaware of the danger, the Bald Eagle was attracted by the smell of food, and immediately approached. The Red Mesa Saint, hiding not far away, watched nervously. Just as the Bald Eagle was about to swallow the mouse, Ed suddenly appeared and stopped it. He had just received word, and was planning to go with Ollie to Argus to pick Chris up. Ed told the Bald Eagle to stay and guard the cabin, then left with Ollie. It was this brief delay that allowed a passing fox to snatch the dead mouse. The Bald Eagle tried to threaten the fox into giving up the food, but the fox turned and fled into the dense forest. With the mouse in its mouth, the Bald Eagle chased after it, and when the fox realized it couldn't escape, it swallowed the dead mouse on the spot. In the blink of an eye, the fox fell to the ground, foaming at the mouth. The Bald Eagle immediately realized the dead mouse was poisonous. Seeing his plan fail, the Red Mesa Saint immediately resorted to his backup plan. He took out his 20-meter-long shotgun, intending to shoot the Bald Eagle. The Red Mesa Saint fired 2 shots in a row, hitting the target accurately. He walked toward the spot excitedly. He picked up the dead eagle from the ground, and was about to leave when another eagle suddenly rushed out and knocked him down. Even his 20-meter-long shotgun fell to the ground. The Red Mesa Saint scrambled to pick up the gun, but 2 eagles snatched it away. Immediately after, more than a dozen eagles of different species appeared from all directions and surrounded him. Only then did the Red Mesa Saint realize the danger, but it was already too late. The next second, the Bald Eagle, who was supposed to be dead, suddenly appeared in front of the Red Mesa Saint, and revealed its true identity.
The prime eagle.
In the end, the Red Mesa Saint was pecked to death by countless eagles. On the other side, Ollie and the other person picked up the battered Chris. They thought everything would return to calm, but Flag had no intention of letting them off so easily. He sent the judo master, Gel, to secretly follow them all the way to the small cabin where Chris was hiding. Flag decided to destroy the quantum portal to prevent the previous disaster from happening again. Gel waited until Chris saw Ollie and the others off before preparing to carry out his sabotage plan. Little did he know that Chris also planned to give up the portal. First, he whistled to call the Bald Eagle back, then entered the cabin and left a note. After everything that had happened, Chris was extremely disappointed with this world. He planned to stay in the parallel universe forever, so he used this letter to say goodbye to everyone. At this point, the Bald Eagle flew back to the cabin, with a finger in its beak. Chris didn't ask about the origin of the finger. Instead, he took the metal box and operated it in front of the portal. The next second, the quantum portal began to show unstable fluctuations. Chris immediately took the Bald Eagle and resolutely walked into the quantum portal. Gel, who was guarding outside, also noticed the abnormality in the cabin. He hurriedly informed Flag and the others, then also left a note and slipped into the dimensional node. Just 1 second before the portal closed. At the same time, Ollie and the other person who had left seemed to suddenly think of something and immediately drove back to the cabin. But when they entered, they just saw the portal close, and there was no one around. They found the note left by Gel, realized the place had been exposed, and that Gel had chased after them, but they had no time to dwell on this. They had to escape with the metal box before more Argus members arrived. Just then, they found the letter left by Chris. They immediately sensed something was wrong, hurriedly gathered Amy and Igor, and discussed what to do next. According to Chris' letter, he wanted to stay in the parallel world forever, to be with his brother and father, and he left the metal box to Ollie and the others. He said that if they handed it over to Argus, they would definitely get a generous reward. After reading the letter, everyone's hearts were filled with mixed emotions. Between friendship and wealth, they chose friendship almost instantly. Amy immediately said they must bring Chris back, but Igor opposed it. He thought there might be a better choice for Chris, but the other three insisted on retrieving their companion. Igor couldn't leave them alone, so he had to go along to find Chris. At this time, in the parallel universe, Chris had just defeated a monster, and then rushed excitedly to the Argus headquarters. When Amy saw Chris, she immediately threw herself into his arms warmly. Then Chris took the opportunity to have a deep conversation with Amy. This was a kind of happiness he had never experienced in his original universe. In the original universe, the four of them, including Amy, went to Ed's place, which was the most hidden spot they could find so far. Before taking action, Ollie asked Amy one last time if she was ready. As this meant giving up the chance of a lifetime of wealth and prosperity, Amy didn't hesitate at all. In this way, the group arrived at the secret base in Ed's house, where countless trophies from his fight against crime were stored. When they saw the countless cash and numerous drugs, everyone's eyes widened in shock. At this moment, Ollie suddenly asked Ed why he still mooched breakfast from her when he was so rich. Unexpectedly, Ed said,
"Well, I'm not gonna use this, man, no way. It's blood money, you crazy?"
The group was left speechless by this answer, but their bodies honestly revealed their true thoughts. Later, Ollie placed the metal box in front of a door. She had seen with her own eyes how Chris moved the portal before, and with her excellent memory, she perfectly replicated his actions. The next second, countless golden lights surged out of the metal box, accompanied by a violent energy shock. The door was transformed into a quantum portal. The group was thrown into disarray by this shockwave.
What the fuck? I have fucking cocaine all over me!
Igor suggested that Ed pour the seized drugs into the sewer for destruction later, but to his surprise, Ed said he had raised crocodiles in the sewer. Igor was left speechless after hearing this. Later, the group passed through the portal and arrived at the dimensional node. Based on what Chris had told Ollie before, they quickly found the shelf full of helmets in front of a door. However, the door had a combination lock, and Amy and the others didn't know the password. Just as everyone was at a loss, Ed suggested trying Chris' original home password. A moment later, he actually opened the door. When they saw the luxurious decoration inside, the four of them couldn't help but exclaim. It was like a palace compared to Chris' original small house. While they were looking around, Chris' brother Keith suddenly appeared. Amy quickly told everyone to hide, and she herself, with her excellent acting skills, made Keith mistake her for the Amy from this parallel universe. Amy tried to find an excuse to get rid of Keith, but unexpectedly, Keith said he was also going to Argus, and offered to give her a ride. To avoid arousing his suspicion, Amy had to agree, so the two went to Argus. After analyzing the current situation, Ed proposed splitting up to find Chris. Ollie wanted to refuse, but Ed had already turned and left. Ollie and Igor were completely unfamiliar with this place, so they had to find another way to look for Chris. At the same time, in the original universe, veteran Agent Fleury reported to Flag that since Chris' disappearance, Igor and Amy had also lost contact. Even the Judo Master Gel was nowhere to be found. This series of bad news made Flag extremely angry. To prevent the quantum fluctuation from causing irreversible damage, he had to find Chris as soon as possible. For this purpose, Flag went to the prison, where he met Luther, the mastermind who had previously controlled the quantum rift and almost destroyed Metropolis. Flag offered to improve the prison conditions in exchange, hoping Luther would provide equipment to accurately locate the quantum space. Considering he had been sentenced to 265 years in prison, and the prison held only superhumans, Luther readily agreed to Flag's proposal. At this time, in the parallel universe, Keith brought Amy to Argus, but as soon as they entered, the police dog nearby kept barking at Amy. Obviously, the drugs on her had triggered the alarm. In accordance with the rules, the guards immediately inspected Amy. Just as she was about to be taken away, Chris happened to witness the scene. He recognized at a glance that she was the Amy from the original universe, so he resolutely stepped in to protect her. On the other side, Ed had arrived at the home of his parallel universe counterpart. He used a key to open the door of the secret base. It seemed this world was almost identical to the original one. Later, he sought his parallel self in the secret base. Their eyes met, and the atmosphere immediately became tense. Fortunately, Ed quickly explained his origin, and his parallel counterpart believed him without hesitation. The two excitedly talked about their respective experiences. At the same time, at Argus headquarters, Chris angrily questioned Amy why she had come here. He had clearly left a note to say goodbye, and told them not to look for him. A fierce argument broke out between them. After calming down, Amy asked when she could leave the isolation room. Chris said he would let her leave, as long as the test results were normal, and then told her to leave quickly afterward. However, Amy told Chris that all four of them had come to this world to find him. Upon hearing this news, Chris' heart was filled with mixed emotions. Although he was very moved, Chris had nothing left to cherish in the original world. He had asked Amy repeatedly before, but she had always rejected him. Yet in this world, Amy truly loved him. Chris had already decided to spend the rest of his life with Amy from this parallel universe. After hearing this response, Amy finally revealed that she had always loved Chris too. She had refused to accept him, only because she was afraid of losing him. Hearing this, Chris' heart became even more complicated. Before he could figure out how to respond, the guard informed Amy that she could leave. As they walked out of the isolation room, Amy suddenly noticed there were no people of color in Argus. This was completely different from the original world. On the other side, Ollie, who had stayed at the residence, decided to go out to look for useful clues. After thinking for a long time, when people saw her, they all showed expressions of panic. Just then, Chris' brother Keith passed by. He immediately got out of the car and gathered people to arrest Ollie. When Chris picked up the national flag on the table, he finally understood what the problem was.
Fuck me.
It was clear that this world had undergone a massive change at some point in its history. Before Chris could think carefully about the meaning behind this, the Amy from this world also arrived at Argus. She learned from the receptionist that a woman who looked just like her had impersonated her. To enter the headquarters, the parallel universe Amy immediately took guards to arrest the other Amy. At the same time, Igor, who was left alone in the house, suddenly saw Chris' father return home. He panicked and hid under the table, but was still discovered. Although the old man was advanced in age, his combat ability was still strong. Igor was subdued in an instant, and under his questioning, Igor quickly spilled everything.
I'm John Economist. I'm from another dimension. I'm here to get our friend Peacemaker, who's your son. He's not really your son.
After hearing this news, the old man was shocked on the spot. At this moment, inside Argus, Chris finally made a decision. He resolutely broke up with the parallel universe Amy, then threw off the surrounding security guards, and fled with the Amy from his original world. However, they were stopped by a group of security personnel. Just as they reached the door, Chris didn't want to hurt them, so he picked up Amy, used the jetpack behind him, and together they crashed through the nearby glass door to escape Argus headquarters. Then the two rode a motorcycle and rushed to the location of the quantum portal. At the same time, during a conversation with his parallel universe counterpart, Ed learned that the other Ed hated Chris' family deeply. He thought they weren't righteous superheroes at all, but scumbags who helped the evil do wrong, which surprised Ed greatly. Later, through further understanding, Ed learned that in this world's World War II, the Nazis led by Hitler had won. Now the entire world was ruled by the Nazis, who had an extreme hatred for all people of color. Hearing this, Ed immediately realized the danger. His companion Ollie, as a black person, would definitely be hunted by the Nazis. He immediately stood up to go rescue her. After learning about this, the parallel universe Ed also decided to go with him to save Ollie. At this time, Keith, who was chasing Ollie, suddenly received a call from his father, informing him that an accident had happened at home, and he must return immediately. Although Keith was unwilling to let that black person escape, just like that, he still followed his father's order and returned home. Without Keith leading the pursuit, Ollie immediately jumped into a swimming pool. She had wanted to use this to escape the pursuers, but unexpectedly, those people also jumped into the water after her. As the pursuers drew closer, an unexpected person suddenly appeared. It was the judo master Gel. For some reason, he chose to save Ollie. With his help, Ollie successfully escaped the pursuit, and the two then hid in a luxury mansion. Through their conversation, Ollie learned about the situation of this world. Gel hoped to escape this world through her help, and the two immediately hit it off. They decided to sneak into Chris' residence after nightfall, then return to their original world through the quantum portal. On the other side, when Keith returned home, he saw Igor tied to a chair. He asked his father what the urgent matter was, and only then learned that his real brother had been killed, and the current Chris was an imposter from another world. No wonder Keith had felt that Chris was acting strange before. He immediately flew into a rage, and vowed to make Chris pay for his brother's death. Although the old man didn't agree with this idea, the most important thing at the moment was indeed to find Chris and prevent him from causing more trouble outside if things really reached the point of no return. He and Keith would also be implicated. After the two left, the bald eagle came out. Igor, tied to the chair, suddenly had an idea. He called the bald eagle to untie the rope for him, but unexpectedly, the eagle misunderstood and brought him another rope instead. At this time, Chris, completely unaware that danger was approaching, was riding a motorcycle with Amy on the road. The police cars behind them were chasing closely, but Chris didn't care at all. His mind was full of Amy behind him, and he enjoyed her embrace, which made his heart stir with waves of emotion. Just then, several more police cars rushed out from the front to intercept Chris and Amy. Helplessly, Chris had to turn into a small road, but there were also police blocking the way there. Seeing that there was no way out, Chris was about to fight the fully armed police to the death. Unexpectedly, at this moment, his father and brother suddenly appeared, and immediately launched an attack on the police. Before Chris and the others could figure out what was happening, they were taken away by Keith and his father. At the same time, in the original universe, Flag and his team obtained equipment that could accurately locate quantum spaces from Luthor. After a series of operations, Argus successfully located the current quantum portal, and Flag immediately ordered his men to head to the target location. On the other side, in the parallel universe, Chris and Amy were taken back to the residence. When they saw Igor tied to the chair, they immediately realized the matter had been exposed. Chris begged Keith and the others to spare Amy, claiming she had nothing to do with the matter, but the enraged Keith intended to make everyone pay for his brother's death. Just then, the old father spoke up to stop him. He wanted to hear Chris' explanation first, so Chris recounted the entire story, making them understand it had only been an accident. Chris admitted he had once thought of not returning, but he longed so much to feel the warmth of a family. At this moment, the old father's heart also wavered a little. Before he could respond, a knock on the door suddenly sounded. It was the pursuing police. In the end, the old father decided to protect Chris. He lied that Chris and the others weren't there, and firmly told the police to leave. Without a search warrant, the police could only stay outside the door. Reluctantly, this scene was all seen by Ollie and Jell, who were hiding not far away. They had to figure out how to sneak past the police and return to the mansion without being noticed. Just then, the two EDS appeared behind them at the same time. After learning about the current situation, they both said in unison that they could return, as long as they took down the police. Even Jell thought this was a good idea, which left Ollie speechless. Under her strong opposition, the group began to plan a sneak entry again. At this moment, inside the mansion, the old father asked Chris how many people had come to this world. Amy was full of hostility toward him. Although they had saved her earlier, they had also killed a dozen innocent police officers, so Amy was very reluctant to answer. Unexpectedly, the old father said those police officers were all Nazi underlings, not innocent people at all. It was clear from his words that he strongly opposed the Nazis. Chris thought the old father was a trustworthy and kind person, and that was indeed the case. The old father had no intention of killing them. He only wanted to send them back to their original world, immediately after everyone gathered, and hoped they would never return. However, Keith couldn't accept this. After all, Chris had killed his brother, and Keith vowed to avenge him, but his father told him that even if he killed Chris, his brother would never come back to life. Even Amy was surprised by the old father's kindness. She had never thought a Nazi could be so understanding. In response, the old father said he didn't consider himself a Nazi. In fact, he also strongly disagreed with the government's actions, but unfortunately, he had no power to change the status quo. He could only fight some criminals and monsters, trying his best to make the world a little better. Before the father could finish speaking, the parallel universe Ed rushed into the room. Before the old father could react, Ed pressed him against the table and stabbed him several times. Seeing his father attacked, Keith reacted quickly. The sound of the fight gave the police outside an excuse to rush into the house. Chris looked at his father, who had stopped breathing, and was overwhelmed with grief. He had just felt the warmth of a family, only to face such a painful separation again. But now, he had no time to grieve. The next second, Amy and the others dragged Chris and hurried toward the quantum portal to escape, but they were stopped by the police who rushed in, and a fierce fight broke out again between the two sides. Immediately after, Keith also joined the battle. In just a few days, Chris had not only killed his brother but also his father. Keith would never forgive this bastard. Chris knew he was in the wrong, and never fought back against Keith's beatings. Soon, he was beaten to the point of being half dead. At this moment, the bald eagle suddenly rushed out, and frantically scratched and pecked at Keith's bald head. Right after that, Amy and the others also rushed over. The parallel universe Ed stabbed Keith several times just like before, and Chris hurried to stop everyone when he saw this. He had only wanted to feel the warmth of a family again, but his arrival had torn apart an originally intact family. Chris couldn't accept such a tragedy at all, but no matter how he apologized, he couldn't undo what had happened, and by this time, Keith was already on the verge of death. The sound of police sirens outside urged everyone to leave quickly, and Chris reluctantly left this place. Amy, who was walking at the end of the group, took advantage of Chris' inattention and prepared to shoot Keith again, to prevent him from chasing them later. At this moment, a large number of police suddenly rushed into the room. Amy had to evacuate into the portal immediately, and finally failed to finish shooting Keith, which made her feel a faint sense of unease in her heart. At this time, Keith, who still had a breath left in the parallel universe, was sent to an ambulance. His eyes were filled with the anger of revenge, and it was obvious he would not let this go. After returning to the original universe, Chris put away the portal and was about to leave with the metal box, but as soon as he went out, he was surrounded by a large number of Argus members. They had been waiting here for a long time. Faced with countless dark muzzles, Chris and the others had to raise their hands and surrender. He handed over the metal box and took all the blame alone, in exchange for the freedom of the others. Everyone watched as Chris was put in handcuffs and taken to Argus headquarters, their hearts filled with helplessness and anxiety. After Chris was arrested and imprisoned, everyone kept trying to visit him in jail, but all attempts were rejected by Chris. This surprised the guards, as few prisoners would refuse to see visitors. It was almost like refusing help from loved ones, but Chris said he was an ominous angel of death, who would only bring misfortune to those around him, and he didn't want to implicate his companions anymore. Because Chris had handed over the metal box and taken all the blame alone, Amy and Igor were quickly promoted based on this merit. On the other side, Flag quickly formed an agent team to explore the world behind the quantum portal in depth. When an agent opened one of the doors, they were stunned by the scene in front of them. All the vegetation and buildings here were in the shape of candy. The air composition was very similar to that of Earth, and the indigenous people were a group of cute creatures with big eyes, like a legendary fairy tale town. Just as everyone thought there was no danger here, the indigenous people suddenly launched an attack on them. These little creatures that looked harmless were actually the top predators here. Hundreds of colorful alien creatures suddenly pounced on the team members and began to frantically tear at their protective suits. Seeing the critical situation, Amy, who was leading the team, immediately informed the members guarding outside the door to pull them out of this weird world at once. Unexpectedly, those alien creatures quickly cut the ropes and closed the portal leading out of this place. Amy had to fight for her life. She pulled out her pistol. Those little monsters were still flesh and blood after all, and under the attack of bullets, they immediately burst into clusters of crystal powder. But there were too many alien monsters. Even when Amy ran out of bullets, she couldn't deal with so many monsters. At this moment, a companion's protective mask was shattered by the monsters. The next second, the little monsters swarmed up and devoured the comrade. When the door opened again, and Amy and the others pulled the teammate back together, his entire head had been completely torn apart, and there was no possibility of survival left. Having witnessed their colleague being torn to death, everyone couldn't help but resist the exploration mission. After hearing those voices of opposition, Flag still insisted that the exploration must continue, but he didn't tell everyone the reason behind it. This kind of concealment aroused resentment from more people. Even Bull, his most loyal subordinate, began to question Flag's decision. At the same time, Igor was also extremely dissatisfied with the exploration plan. After hearing Amy's account, he had previously thought Argus was doing this to prevent a repeat of the Metropolis Rift incident, but given the danger shown in the exploration so far, he was very worried that Argus might personally create a space-time rift that would destroy the world. On the other side, Ollie found Ed and hoped he would use the mountain of cash at his home to bail Chris out of prison. However, Ed refused without hesitation. He believed the money was dirty, and using it would leave a stain on his life. He didn't want to bring a curse on future generations. Ed even claimed he would rather break Chris out of prison than touch a single penny of this money. Seeing how stubborn Ed was, Ollie could only persuade him patiently, making him understand that using dirty money for a just cause wouldn't leave any stain on his life, and might even earn him a good reputation. Persuaded by Ollie, Ed finally agreed to use the money to save Chris. In this way, Chris successfully left prison. However, to everyone's surprise, Chris disappeared without a trace with the bald eagle. Soon after being released, no matter how everyone tried to contact him, they never got a response, which made them extremely anxious. In the following days, everyone searched for Chris while completing their respective tasks. Amy led the team to explore multiple portals in depth, encountering all kinds of terrifying worlds. Comrades in the agent team also sacrificed one after another. Amid these dangers, making the remaining members even more resistant to the exploration plan, but Flag still insisted that everyone continue the exploration. Looking at the constantly coming intelligence, Flag's expression became more and more excited, as if he was about to get what he had been looking for. He didn't notice at all that many people in Argus were already dissatisfied with this, believing that Argus' current actions were no different from those of evil organizations. They were just waiting for an opportunity to rise up. Before long, Amy and the others finally discovered a parallel universe, very similar to Earth behind one of the portals. After seeing the report on the indicators of this universe, Flag's excitement was evident. It was clearly what he had been looking for. Flag immediately met with the Secretary of Security and several other senior government officials, and told them in detail why he had been searching for this parallel universe. Flag called this place Redemption Star, and planned to turn it into a prison specifically for detaining and exiling heinous superhumans. In this way, they wouldn't need to create a pocket universe specifically to detain prisoners like Luther did. Moreover, since the planet was connected via a portal, this would not only avoid the rift crisis, but also effectively prevent prisoners from escaping. After hearing this, the Secretary of Security and others thought Flag's idea was very good, and immediately approved his proposal. Soon, Bowl learned about this. She deeply felt that Flag had completely deviated from Argus' original purpose, so she decided to rebel. Later, she found Amy and told her everything about Flag's prison construction plan, hoping Amy would help find a way to stop Flag. However, Amy didn't know what to do about this kind of thing for a while, so she suggested gathering other companions to discuss it together. After a whole night of in-depth discussion, everyone finally came up with a solution: find Peacemaker Chris and let him take the lead in establishing a new justice organization to stop Flag's plan. At the same time, Chris, who knew nothing about this, was sitting in front of a hotel, recalling every bit of his time with Amy. He still couldn't let her go, but to avoid causing more harm to everyone, he could only keep choosing to escape. On the other side, Amy and the others went to the Argus base. With Igor's help, they successfully located Chris and then rushed to the spot by car. At this time, Chris was planning to hide somewhere else, but unexpectedly, he was stopped by everyone on the spot. Ed immediately controlled Chris with a stun gun to prevent him from escaping again. Later, Chris was taken back to the house by the group. Amy asked why he had been avoiding everyone, and thus learned about the struggle in Chris' heart. Through all his previous experiences, Chris believed he would bring bad luck to those around him. When he was 8 years old, he witnessed his brother Keith die right in front of him. Later, he became good friends with Flag's son Rick, but ended up killing Rick with his own hands and eventually had to kill his father too. When Chris tried to go to the parallel universe to retrieve his lost happy family, another tragedy happened due to various accidents. Chris didn't want to put his companions in danger because of himself again, and it was this fear that made him leave without saying goodbye. After understanding the reason, everyone comforted, persuaded, and encouraged Chris. Finally, he mustered up the courage again to face his true self. Chris returned to his friend's side and shouldered the mission of upholding justice together with them. Before leaving, Chris asked Amy the question that had been bothering him all along, whether that night had any special meaning to her. After going through all this, Amy no longer hid her feelings, and gave an affirmative answer without hesitation, which made Chris extremely excited. Soon after, the group went to Ed's house, took all the tens of millions of cash there, and then founded a company called Killshot, in the name of Peacemaker Chris to counter Argus. In addition to Amy and the others, the company's members included many people who were dissatisfied with Argus, such as the Rebel Bull, Veteran Agent Flurry, and Judo Master Gel. They planned to make the world a better place in their own way. Just as everything was moving in a good direction, another accident happened. Chris was suddenly attacked by a group of mysterious people on his way home from work. Before he could react, he was roughly subdued and taken onto a van. When Chris opened his eyes again, he saw Flag standing in front of him with a proud look. Flag told Chris that this place would later be used to detain superpowered criminals, but before it was officially put into use, they needed to confirm how the environment there would affect the human body, and the government had agreed to let Chris be the test subject. After saying that, Flag threw him into the portal. Chris realized Flag was taking revenge for personal grievances. He tried to rush back to the portal to escape the trap, but Flag had already closed it quickly. Chris was thus trapped on an unfamiliar planet. Although no other animals could be seen around, the roars coming from a distance proved it was by no means a safe place. No one knew how Chris would escape, and the film ended here. Peacemaker Season 2 was released in August this year. The series was filmed almost simultaneously with Superman Legacy, so there are many crossover elements between the two works in the show. The first part of the series was criticized for being a bit slow-paced, But the plot was still reasonable and exciting, and the character development was very detailed. However, the final episode was really hard to describe. Many viewers said it was too abrupt, and seemed quite unoriginal. Perhaps it was for this reason, that people think the second season isn't as good as the first. What do you, the viewers, think? Feel free to leave your opinions in the comments section. If you like my channel, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe.